morning. Or wait, it's not morning. It's afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, all of our volumes are all up.
A bunch of geniuses.
If you're in California, it's still good morning.
Ah,
I guess it is. Well,
What about
I
Hawaii?
guess technically it's good morning here too because it's.
oh yeah, it's not noon yet.
It's not noon yet.
Yeah,
Glad to have you with us on the
Buenos dias.
podcast. We got
Japan morning.
okay.
Japan's tomorrow.
If you're in
Okay, yeah.
Okinawa watching this, good morning. Good to have Tim and Bruce back with us. We are going to jump back into 1 John. We're going to finish up, Lord willing, we'll finish up chapter 2. I don't see why we shouldn't. But I did ask the guys to just share something positive today, something that the Lord's blessed you with, to varying degrees of enjoyment. And I won't let you start.
Oh, are we doing that right now?
Yeah.
All right, awesome.
Top of the hour.
It's part of the intro. I like it. I like it.
Wait, no, we didn't do the intro.
We didn't do the intro.
We didn't do the
Hi.
intro. We're gonna do blessings, and we're gonna do 1 John chapter 2. We'll be back in a minute. I forgot the intro. Welcome back to TV Land.
Yeah, TV land. I like it.
Bruce,
Yes, sir.
give us something positive.
Oh, way back in the beginning of 2021 or 2022, I can't remember. The Lord kind of showed me that this next season of my life was going to be all about family, and I thought I knew what He meant by that, and as we've gone along, He's done some crazy stuff, and I got to meet last Friday in person my sister. My mom had a daughter who was 2 years older than me, and she got taken away from her and such. So I never got to meet her, never got to be around her, any of that good stuff.
Nice.
So we met in person Friday night, and that was cool. It was good.
So it was the first meeting.
Yeah. And then Sunday, she came and watched me preach, and then we went to lunch afterwards. And at lunch, she sat beside Sandy, and here's the blessing part. She sat beside Sandy, and her husband sat beside Hudson, her husband Steve, and her name's Tina. And man, I was almost like left out of the conversation. It was so cool watching her and Sandy just click, you know.
Yeah, no, I
And
understand
it's like
that.
they've been sisters their whole lives, and I was like,
That's
okay,
awesome.
that's cool.
It's
Yeah,
cool watching that kind
yeah.
of
So
stuff.
that was my blessing.
Cool. Tim, you got anything?
You go first.
That means no.
Well, actually, I do.
No,
Well,
But
then
you
go.
No, you go first.
Okay, I'll go first. Mine's actually, I have two small ones, and they're not big things, but I guess I'm kind of in a season where little things are appreciated. there's been so much going on. It's just it's just been one of those times. And I guess these kind of all string together. There's two or three kind of, but it's all one big thing. You know, I mean, a year ago we went to Cross Brand, little over,
Right.
about it'll be a year this past July.
Mhm.
Because I was preaching and Eli was killed and all that. We just never left.
Right.
And one of the things that was just kind of really bumming me out up to that point was I just didn't get to speak a lot, didn't get to preach a
Yeah.
lot, and I just missed it.
Yeah.
And have gotten to really do that, exercise my gifts. That's been a real blessing. One of the things as a ministry that we do is, try to be available for places like Baxter, Falba.
Right.
We've gone, Tim and I spent, 3 months at Fruitvale
Yeah,
a couple
yeah.
years ago to just fill in China Grove. I know, Tim, you do one over there for these small churches that don't have a lot of help.
Right.
I mean, that's a
Absolutely.
big deal. I mean, and I've
Absolutely.
actually talked with a guy at church the other day that he's got a guy, I forget where he told me this guy lived. Maybe it was Grapeland. He's a pastor in
Mhm.
Grapeland,
Yes.
little bitty church.
Yes.
And
Yes.
he was just talking about how he doesn't have anybody.
Mhm.
And then got to fill in for Mike a couple of times here, last night, the night before, and then we'll be filling in again Sunday. He's not feeling well.
Yeah.
That's just been a real blessing to be able, not just to speak because I enjoy it.
Give
I
him
love
a
teaching
break.
God's word, but just give him a break, and to see our ministry as a whole kind of growing into this place to where we're getting some
Yeah.
traction.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard. It's surprisingly difficult to get traction in a little. I mean, because we're not
Yeah.
backed by anybody that anybody knows. They don't
Right.
know us from Adam,
Right.
and just knowing it's just been neat to watch. And then this is a silly one, but as I was looking at, okay, we're doing Bible characters on Sunday, and I was talking with Tammy about, hey, who do you want to hear about,
Mhm.
and she offers up Mephibosheth.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
And I was like, I just fell in love with you all over again because you, Mephibosheth. But anyway, and that's a silly one, but it was just the fact that I appreciate the fact that my wife studies the Word. She's in the Word
Yeah,
every day.
yeah, yeah.
And that she came up with Mephibosheth.
That's cool. That's
I don't know that I'm going to do Mephibosheth, but it was.
I would. I'd jump on that one in a heartbeat.
I may. It was her choices were that Mephibosheth, Abigail, or Mordecai. Those were her
Mhm.
three options,
Oh,
and I was
cool.
like, man, those are all three good. Because
Yeah.
I just did Shammah, David's mighty man, which
Mhm.
900 people, and I was like, who all has ever heard a message on Shammah? Nobody. Nobody
Yeah,
talks
I'd
about
have
him,
to say that
and it's one
too.
of my favorite stories.
Absolutely.
Anyway, just been a blessing to be able to be used and to see my wife. Get
Isn't that
involved.
cool? Yeah.
All right, Tim.
Well,
I mean-
mine's not like of monstrous proportions like y'all are necessarily, but
I thought mine was little bitty.
well, I mean, I think that, or at least for me, blessings are it is a day-to-day thing, and the one I have is really from last night. But even when I'm going to use the term called in the ministry, which happened some time back, the fact that he still wants me to be involved in some kind of a ministerial function, and I don't mean just formally, like
Right.
showing up at a church, but I mean just like this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I say that because, so we have been teaching it, or teaching people doing our study of the Bible course, and right now we're doing it in Falba. What kind of church is that?
It's a full gospel.
Full Gospel Church, yeah. So, Matt couldn't go last night. Normally, when we do these things, he's the front runner. It's his program. He built it, put it together. I
Right,
mean, all
right.
of it, right? And I'm just kind of running around on his coattails. And but because of our teaching dynamic, we kind of fill in each other on various places and
Mhm.
reading the crowd, and so to speak.
Yep.
And anyway, last night I had to go do it on my own, and went up there, and so me being me, I can't follow a direction for nothing. So I kind of jerked out of the middle of it and pulled it in. Well, for that particular crowd, it actually worked out pretty well. And
Right.
what we were trying to train
Yeah.
on in terms of using the program and what we were actually using as the study part. And we're talking about a room full of rednecks in there, right? They're like me, they really didn't have great educational functions or anything like that.
Right.
And they were locked in. They were just, I don't even know what the word to use.
Focused.
Well, they
Hungry?
were focused,
Tenacious.
but they were getting things in terms of tools
Right,
and
right.
how to
Right.
associate what that really meant. And they were going, man, this is like the coolest thing ever.
That's awesome.
And that's not, it was cool seeing that all the effort that Matt was talking about our ministry's taking off, so to
Mhm.
speak. Well, I mean, he's been digging in this thing for 10 or 15 years.
Yep.
And so it was cool to watch that transpire.
Yeah.
Seeing people get it, I guess you could break it down
Yeah,
to its smallest
absolutely.
denominator.
Absolutely.
Not just getting it like I think they should get it.
Right.
It was like, I can actually use this.
Yeah.
That was the thing.
And I think you just leaned out of the frame.
Oh.
I'm going to put you some blue tape. Don't go past.
Hi, Tim.
We were talking about, Tim and I were actually talking about that though on the phone last night. As I was coming home, we were just checking in, see how things went. When we were in Mexico doing this with the pastors,
Right.
it was amazing to both of us the impact that such simple tools made on them.
Right.
And partly because there was this feeling of nobody comes to help us anymore.
Right.
Like one of
Yeah,
the guys
and
said-
those were people that'd been in the ministry for 20 or 30
30 years.
years.
Yeah.
One of the guys said that Tim was the last American that came into Hamave
Yeah.
15 years ago.
Yeah.
16, 17 years ago now.
You know. Yeah, I got to be careful not to get off on that. But yes.
Go ahead. No, that's
No, it's I used to have a point of view where I had a certain view of these smaller churches and what was going on. And as the Lord has kind of turned that for me and shown me the bigger picture, a lot of times it's because nobody's helping them.
yeah.
They got no support. They got no help.
Yeah.
And you know, we're doing a great job. I think I think we could do a better job, but we're doing a pretty good job, at least in this region, from what I see, of discipling younger folks
Mhm.
to move into roles. But you know, too often they want to move into a role making a full salary.
Yeah.
You know, a church of 20 or 30 folks can't do that.
No, when I was even at Martin's Mill, even when it was, I think when I started pastoring there in 2007, fall of 2007, we were talking 125 people.
Right.
Really difficult to generate what really is a full-time salary. Now,
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
times what happens is the pastors, because it's our pastor's heart. And this is really not a topic that we were planning to talk about, but it's a good one.
No,
Yeah.
but I think it still fits in the context.
Actually, I'm with you. I'm sitting here going, but there's a great tie-in here.
Yeah.
Because, and I guess the preview to 1 John 2 would be, it's easy to fall into traps of
Right.
this world. And one of those traps being, I've got to have X or I've got to do Y, and it's got to be done a certain way. You got to
Right.
be full-time, whatever. Well, and so a lot of what pastors will do on these little churches, because their hearts, they have a shepherd's heart, not
Right.
an entrepreneurial heart, is they'll just do it and be living, not even living paycheck to paycheck, living hand to mouth, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, there's a reason there's a saying that says we're been poor as church mice,
Right.
but, and I respect that, and I've always, when I go to these conferences, I've always, on my feedback, I always put, take the mega church pastors off the stage. I want to hear from the guy that's been in the same place on the backside of Podunk, USA for 50 years, feeding the same flock and their kids and their grandkids, and he's baptizing them and he's doing their weddings and he's done a bunch of their funerals and he's just there.
Right.
I want to hear from that guy.
Yeah.
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 And it was such a blessing, though, to hear that testimony from folks at Falba, because we hear that everywhere we go and
Yes.
do this. I
Yes.
don't care if it's the backside of the moon or if it's First Baptist of wherever.
Yep.
The people who come are people who are interested in learning how to get into God's Word and know who He
Amen.
is.
Amen.
If they don't want to do that, they ain't coming to this thing.
Right.
But when they do, it has amazed me how many people have been in the church literally since birth, and they're walking with the Lord for 30 years, and just the world is open to them because of a silly little tool that we showed them,
Oh yeah.
where they can open up, I can actually study the Greek.
Yeah.
And they don't
Yeah.
have to know Greek.
And it's not hard, and I don't have to know it. And yeah, the connotations of how they think that works, and all of
Yeah,
a sudden,
yeah.
that's not
Well,
what it
and
is.
part of it's because I when I was taking one of my courses in prep for the PhD program at Midwestern, it was a high level, seminary level. It wasn't a master's level course, and it was kind of a transitionary course
Right.
on stuff. And I encountered some guys in there that really discouraged what we're doing.
Right.
And the
Right.
because of what they were, their thing was is if you can know just enough to be dangerous and really get it wrong. And I was
Well,
just
that's
like,
that's the Dark Ages. That's the Dark Ages tying the Bible to the pulpit.
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
I can get fired up on that.
Well, and I will tell you, we're talking about blessing. Being a senior pastor in Western American church culture is hard. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not hard for the reasons you would think it's hard. It's
Mhm.
not hard because of biblical reasons. It's not even necessarily hard it is hard because you're always walking on the fringes of people's lives. I
Right.
mean, you're
Right.
walking through every let's just say there's 40 families. Well, you're getting to walk through the fringes of tragedy with all 40 of them,
Right.
and they walk through it with one or two or three in their
Right.
home group. And that's hard.
Yeah.
But the really hard part about being a pastor in the Western American church, and I specifically will label it that way, we talked about labels last week, is the stuff that we get trapped in. And it really does tie into the 1 John chapter 2.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is the lust of the flesh, the pride of life, and those sort of things. It's not
Yeah.
really. When I got, you know Randy Sinclair?
I love Brother Randy.
I do too. He really, and I'll just have to tag him when this gets to Facebook and tell him we mentioned him. At a Tres Dias weekend, he literally was used by God to change the trajectory of my entire ministry.
Yep.
By and Tim has been saying something very similar with different language for a long time, but I always struggled with, well, what am I supposed to do if I'm not at the pulpit all
Right.
the time? If I'm
Right.
not that guy.
Right.
How do you do this, you know?
Right.
And he really let me have. The first time I'd met this home guy that I didn't know this guy from Adam,
Yeah.
and he ripped into me a little bit.
Right.
I mean, like a father to a son.
Mhm. Right.
I don't know how old Randy is, but
Right.
he's well my senior.
Yeah.
And at first I was really taken aback by that, but it literally changed the trajectory to put me in a mindset that the dogs were yipping, yeah, of understanding that, here, I'll help you, Tim. I'll just come over here. It put me in a mindset of understanding that 90%, 95% maybe of the ministry that I get to do that's really impactful, is what Tim was talking about,
Right.
is not being in that room.
That's right. That's right.
And embracing that, understanding that has been such a blessing.
Yeah.
And I'm like Tim, a lot of times I think, why in the world, why us?
Right.
But the honest truth is I find, and I'm not trying to puff us up. I'm not trying to say that. It's just a reality and an observation.
Yeah.
We experienced it even with the local Southern Baptist. When we were at Martin's Mill, I was always trying to get missionaries to come in. And after years of failure, I couldn't get one, not one. No one ever came in 10 years of being there. And they finally told me, it's because you're so small. They have to really, bang for buck. And, there's a practical side that I get that, but then it makes me step back and go, but what kind of process what are we actually fostering here?
Right.
And, and I'm like, I can't sell missions, as it were, and you don't want to sell missions, but it's hard to say, give to these nameless, faithless people that you'll never see, into these situations that you'll never experience.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when Tim came in and started taking us to Nicaragua and Mexico and stuff like that, everybody that went, everyone, to the person, it changed their not just changed their life. It changed their view of the kingdom. It changed their view of church.
Amen.
And all of that to say, just being able to shepherd in the body without title, without position, has been an extremely rewarding.
Yep.
And I'm watching you guys do it all the time.
Right. Good stuff.
And it's just good stuff. 1 John chapter 2. We've just got through talking through the first part of church, 1 John chapter. Y'all realize this is like a tiny little letter, and we were on like week 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
We probably go a lot longer than that, but that's neither here nor there.
But John's letters are deep, man.
Yeah.
This cat, I was talking last night about, how young he probably was, and I remember, it's like all of the apostles were young when they were walking with Jesus.
Right.
Early or late teens.
Yeah.
Probably early 20s at the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And John comes in like he's the kid, he's the runt.
Right.
And with the language, of him crawling, it sounds like, when you read it in the Greek and the, like even some of the Aramaic in the Gospels, it sounds like he crawled up in Jesus' lap.
Right.
It's not just like he was, doing this.
Right.
It wasn't there's an affectionate, and he talks about Jesus differently. His gospel is not one of the synoptic gospels. It's different.
Yeah.
His perspectives are different. It's likely that he was really young, which makes me want to know about his family history. Who did. But there's another thing that had hit me last night. I don't want to monologue here, but it gets into what he's about to say. If he were that young, let's just say he was 10
Right.
or 11.
Right.
Let's just say, in their culture, remember Hannah and Samuel.
Right.
When you had somebody who had this priestly, in the Old Testament, the priestly call, they turned their kids over to the
yeah.
temple.
Ooh, come on.
And you just let them go. You turned them over to the Lord.
Yeah.
They kind of did that with the rabbinical teaching in the early Jewish church.
Right.
I'm not a scholar on that, so I'm curious. So if anybody
Yeah.
sees this and the history, but I know that they would do that as they got up,
Right.
I'm gonna say middle school age or whatever it was. I just wonder if that's kind of what was happening here,
Right.
and I don't know. I'm not asserting that it is,
Right. Yeah.
but there's a
It's a
feel
good
that,
question. Absolutely. Yeah.
and I wish somebody who knows it would see this and research and let us know. But because there's a feel like
Yeah.
Jesus raised him. That's what I'm really
Yeah.
getting to.
Yeah. Absolutely.
As almost as a son
Yeah.
for 3 years, and then the other guy. And if that be true, I can almost just see the big brothers kind of coming in with John,
Yeah.
and you can even see that in some of the spats. Why is he special?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then Jesus is like, it's none of your business if he lives forever,
Right.
kind of stuff. And you can see that interplay that you would have amongst brothers. I'm not asserting that that's canon.
Right.
I'm wondering,
Yeah.
simply because John's relationship was different,
Yeah.
which is when we get to
That's a good observation.
we get to chapter 1 and verse 12. To me, that gives context. This is later in his life, and you still see that tenderness coming through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't necessarily think we need to read it every word, but he says, I'm writing to you, little children, because you've been forgiven. Then he says, I'm writing to you, fathers, because you've come to know the one who's from the beginning. And he says, I'm writing to you, children. It's interesting that he has little children and children.
Right.
And
Right.
is that a linguistic, tool that he's using? Is that significant? I mean, what do y'all think?
In the CSB, is that what I have?
Yeah, that's what I got too.
It says children, fathers, and young men.
Oh yeah, I skipped young men.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then back to children again. Yeah.
and the fathers again.
Yeah.
Tim, you had some thoughts on that. What you thought the significance of?
Well, it's easy to read that and start parking and trying to figure out what his perspective is. And you said something. John's letters are deep,
Right.
but I don't think he's trying to get intellectually deep.
No, they're kingdomly.
He's trying to explain what he is seeing.
Yeah.
Revelation, the book of Revelation is a good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean he's trying to live in it too, but at the age he was at when he wrote this thing, he's been living in it. He's been
wow.
showing it, not just preaching it. He's not.
It's not.
A
an
lot
academic
of people would
exercise,
assume, because I'm hold the pastorship of a church. This is just an example. It actually happens outside the church too. But you hold this position, so to speak, and a lot of people can see that you're just trying to do everything you can to meet up to that office. You're not really, you're still growing and developing in it and all that kind of stuff, right? That's
Right.
not what's happening here. He's actually been there, and he's going through the struggle of trying to get other people to see it. And so the New Living Translation, I think, is a good translation, rendering of that. So like in verse 12, he says, I am writing to you who are God's children. A perspective function is why I say that, right? And it's relative to the other stuff. Because your sins have been forgiven through Jesus, and he just went through all that in the stuff we'd studied. I'm writing to you who are mature in the faith, where he says fathers, right? Because you could get into that and go, see, he's talking to the men, he ain't talking to the women.
No.
I don't think that's the case necessarily, and it's certainly not an argument to be had. And then he says, I'm writing to you who are mature in the faith because you know Christ who existed from the beginning. And in the other translations, it's because you know him who has been from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So mature people, you can see things here already, whether you can articulate them or run through them or not, but you also have the experience to know how you have to push through things that are going messed up, right?
Right.
And then he says, I'm writing to you who are young in the faith. He's talking about young men in the other translations, because you have won your battle with the evil one. I really don't have a great interpretation of what that means, but simply it could just mean the fact that you are saved, because he's talking to people
Right.
that are in that
Right.
condition, right? And he expounds on that a little further down here. I've written to you who are, I skipped it, sorry. Mature, beginning, I'm writing to you who are young in the faith. Oh, here you go. I am writing to you who are young in the faith, talking about children now, not little children, but the children. And this is, I think it's a perspective difference. You who are young in the faith, because you have won your battle with the evil one. And then in 14, it says, I have written to you who are God's children, going back to the little children thing. I've written to you who are God's children because you know the Father. And I think that's pretty simple, and from the fact that, in talking about whether it's mature or somebody who's in the beginning of the faith, is that we have this function where if you've been saved and you know it, my salvation, all I know how to describe it is I was sitting there, there was preaching going on at the time, and God basically just sat on me, and the Spirit was like, I'm God. Do you know who I am? And I went,
No.
yes. And I believe that that's who you are. That's all I had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the faith of a child.
Well,
I'm not trying to put myself in a mirror. I'm just saying, when you talk to one of your children and they know their mom and dad's voice in a group full of people too.
Yeah.
It's that simple. There's no intellectual prowess to it or any kind
Well,
of
it's like
stuff.
when you try to, somebody's brand new. I recently had somebody's like, I'm not sure what to pray here. And I was like, well, just pray what you got, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
God's seeing your heart anyway. That's where the Spirit comes in
Yeah.
and will. And it's not even that's even too dogmatic. It's just like,
I would tell you that you're responding. He's calling and talking to you, and you're,
Yeah.
as the creation, you're going, nothing's ever dealt with me like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
well, and I noticed something in here before we even get to the next section. What he does in verse 14 is he just repeats himself.
Yeah.
And
And there's a reason for that.
well, yeah, and there's repetition, you know, that he's doing that, but you always want to read in the context, and because I taught on chapter 3 last night, it's in my mind.
Right.
He's going to, in chapter 3, build this. It's not building a case for it, but it's to highlight the fact of he's writing this to people who are God's children.
Yes.
And one of the
Mhm.
things that I was explaining last night was, you know, people like to say everybody is a child of God. That's the world.
Mm-hmm.
And there's accuracy to that, in that every human being is a child of God in the creative order sense.
And that, I think that's the right way to interpret it.
And
But go ahead.
go, no, go.
I was like, but in chapter 3, he starts making a distinction between being a child of God in the creation sense, like just because you're a human,
Yes.
descendant of Adam,
Right.
and then there are members of the family,
Right.
child of God.
Right.
There is a distinction, and he really lays that out, starting in 3, and there's scriptures all over the place.
Yep.
But
He's
And-
actually building up to that, to the latter part of 2.
he
as
is
well.
He is, and I think what he's doing here, he's like, I'm writing you this, whether you take it as literal chronology, little kids,
Mhm.
men, whatever, or, and it's not an either or then if you interpret it as maturity levels or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
he's like, what is it that he boils it down to in this last part? He goes, I'm writing you this for 3 reasons.
Yeah.
Because you know God,
Mm-hmm.
you're strong in the word, and you've conquered the evil one.
Yeah.
Those 3 things are the qualifiers
Yeah.
that got them to be recipients of this letter.
Yeah.
And he's like, you have those 3 things because you're children. He's gonna tie that into, in verse
Yeah.
chapter 3. You know God, you know the word, and it's strong in you. You're strong because of it. You've conquered the evil one.
Yeah.
Because you're family.
Yeah. And if you read John 16, the last part of 32,
Like
Jesus-
John the book, not First
Yeah.
John.
Think.
yeah. Yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. And if you read that whole section there that Tim we just went over, it's basically saying the same thing again. All of this says, hey, you're not alone. In
Right.
me you have peace. And then this is kind of the qualifier down here. Yeah,
Right.
I get it.
Well, and because one of the things I brought out last night, and I think the Spirit, as I was really struggling with how to I just wasn't. I was like, this is gonna be boring. I don't know, and you know, and it just is what it is. And I really was praying about, Lord, what is it that you're really trying to? And the thing that He gave me, and then we talked about it. I ran out of time, and I only got through 3 verses.
Right.
Was that
And he was picking on us a while ago.
I know, right?
Tell me.
But being in the family means something.
Yeah.
And he's writing this letter to members of God's family. You can be a part of creation and not be a part of God's family. My kids used to have friends come over when they were younger, and we always treated them like they're our own. You know, you do that with your kids' friends, and when they're with you, you treat them the same. But it's not the same.
Right.
They're not your kid. If something happens to you, those kids aren't getting your inheritance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
There's privileges, and what I went over last night.
Oh, I got you.
There's privileges and responsibilities that go with being in a family.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's things you get. I don't pay for other people's kids' phones and gas and
Right.
stuff, but I help my own.
Right.
But there's also responsibilities that come with being in a family. Like you got to take out the trash, help mow the yard, and keep your room, and that kind of thing. And as we get into verse 15, I think he's really setting the stage here that everything I'm about to tell you, I'm
Right.
telling you because you're family,
Right.
not
Yeah.
just because you're
Real
a random.
family,
Yeah.
not what would be the word like what you're talking about when you have other people's kids, you just treat them like your own. It's not that.
It's not relational family. It's like, I mean, it's not relation. It's not like acquaintance family. It's like,
That's a good,
Mm,
yeah.
yeah.
It's
So
like-
he's talking about you are the family.
well, and
Yeah.
it even transcends biological.
Mhm.
Yes.
You know, the analogies that I was given last night, I think the spirits kept coming in mind. Is like, you can even have real well, your sister's a great example.
Right.
She's family.
Right.
Yeah, there's history or not history.
Right.
There's absence of it, but at the end of the day,
It's easy to pull it together.
Yeah.
it's yeah,
Yeah.
and you can suffer things for family that you may not be willing to suffer
Mhm.
for other people. But what I found is that I have spiritual brothers and sisters
Mhm.
that the relationship transcends even my biological relationship
Yeah.
by a long shot.
Well, the situation with my sister, that was that I didn't get to that part, but she's a believer. She's a Christ follower. She's doing ministry, so that whenever we biologically in flesh got together and got to meet, our spirits had already been meshed years ago.
Well, in one of the scriptures, I forget the reference now. Is it Romans? Maybe in Romans 8? I forget. Is Romans or Galatians 1, where he says the Spirit, capital S, bears witness
Bears
with my
witness,
spirit
yeah.
that we are children of God.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you meet another child of God,
Yeah,
his
come on,
spirit, you know, and I've said this analogy before, and you guys are in this camp I'm about to talk about, and not in a bad way, but I know people, I would even call them spiritual acquaintances,
Right. Yeah.
that they go to church, maybe we're even in the same church.
Right.
They're not bad people, but they're just they're just doing church.
Right.
Good folks, friends.
Yep. Come on.
And then there's another set of people. Sometimes they're in that same environment, sometimes they're not.
Right.
But when you encounter them, even from the first time,
Right.
it's like, ooh, this cat's different.
Yeah.
There's a draw, a knit. Tim and I talk about our souls being knit together.
Mhm.
Why are we even friends? I don't know. We don't have the same interests. We don't, you know.
Mhm.
But when your spirit bears witness with the spirit and
Mhm.
someone else's spirit, it's different. And there's no, I don't have the linguistic capacity to articulate it
Right.
because it's a supernatural bond.
That's good.
That's who he's talking to here.
Right.
You're
Right.
not just regular schmoes. Oh, and by the way, that's when it's important what he's about to jump into.
Right.
I mean, talk
Yeah,
about the pastoral roles
yeah.
and stuff.
So, on a practical function here, explain one more time what you were talking about, how he was addressing the fathers, the young men, and the children. Say that one more time.
He was, you know, God, the word is strong in you, and you've overcome the evil one.
So I want everybody to put that in the context. Is it Philippians 2? working out your salvation with fear and trembling? Because we're all always wondering about doing God's will and that kind of thing. And I think that John was just like what Matt said. Matt said he doesn't have the linguistic capability to tell you exactly. And I think John was suffering with the same thing.
Right.
That's why his letters seem kind of disjointed or deep or however it is you want to say that. But it is very simple. And so it's not complex. It's easy to look at things and say, well, it's deep. What we're really saying is it's too complex for me to grab a hold of it. Don't think that's happening on any level whatsoever.
Well, it's what is the definition of holy? Holy is different. It literally translates to other than.
Right.
It's just it's outside the scope of what we can even define. That's what holy means. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not just set apart. It's different.
Yeah.
I mean, there have been times where, you know, we've been in the hospital with Brenna or whatever, and friends would show up and just be there.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way to articulate. When Eli died, and people just showed up. There's nothing that was overtly done. There was no formula. There was no, we did this and it was good.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, how do you put that into words, the bond that you feel? You know, the people you've been to combat with, Tim. And the reason it's hard to articulate is because it's other than.
Right.
Yeah. It's kingdom stuff is outside of the context of the earthly stuff.
Yeah.
And I think he's addressing that here. Don't be afraid of the world, because you know the Father.
Right.
He's your dad. The word is strong in you. You've already overcome the evil one. Now, do not love the world or the things of the world.
Tim said this a few times the last couple of weeks. He's kind of wrapping it up one more time and saying, hey, you have everything you need.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what John,
Yeah.
I keep making a big deal out of that because I see that in Peter's writings. I see it in Paul's writings.
Yeah.
It's a commonality that I keep seeing through all these things.
You have everything you need.
And however they're saying it, and they say those things, and then they come back and they go, okay, here's, the stuff you've been asking me about or whatever. And then they always, in one way or another, seem to come back out of the backside of that going, quit sweating over this stuff.
Right.
You have it, press on, which is why I keep going back to this is what he's talking about, working out your fear, your salvation and fear and trembling is because you are equipped. He equipped you, and he's giving you that capacity, and now you're just getting to work over the choice and the not choice, which is kind of gets off in the next thing there.
Right.
He says that, verse 15, so now he switches. Do not love the world, nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the boastful pride of life, is not from the Father. Remember, we were talking about darkness last week.
Right.
And so, but that is from the world. Verse 17. The world's passing away.
Yeah.
All those things that he just said. And so, what was that, verse 15?
I don't know what you read.
17.
Yeah, hold on. So, everybody thinks the New Living Translation is what I live my life on. It's not really. I'm looking because it gives a good definition in English. Verse 15, do not love the world nor the things it offers you. For when you love the world, you do not have the love of the Father in you. For the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and a pride of our achievements and possessions. Oof. I think that is an accurate translation of what he was talking about.
That's a great way to say that. Yeah.
It is.
Now listen, that hit me right between the eyes because I measure my success, if you want to talk about church work,
right,
in ministry of if I do something, what kind of response am I going to get back on that or what I'm looking for because it elevates whether, listen, I'm right or not.
Yeah.
John's going, that's not the measure.
That's good.
And that's hard to grasp.
Well, and one of the things that the lust of the flesh, a lot of people use this passage to talk about don't drink, smoke, chew, run around with women that do.
Mm-hmm.
And Not that that's wrong. Not that that just can't apply here.
Mhm.
But that's really not what he's not really talking about. Just make sure that you're doing everything right.
He's kind of literally saying, from what Tim just said, he's kind of literally saying, even being right can be done wrong.
Exactly.
Well, it's even like the shadow in the reality.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Because he's saying if you're living your life by trying to measure you're doing right, by doing these things,
Yeah.
all that's passing away.
Absolutely.
And you're going to be like, well, what am I supposed to do to know what's happening here?
Right.
Who was, I forget the guy, was like a 15th century theologian or whatever, that said his goal, he said, my goal is to be faithful and die unknown or something like that, and be forgotten, to die and be forgotten, be
absolutely.
faithful or something,
Yeah.
live for Jesus, die and be forgotten or something. I don't remember how it goes,
Yeah.
but it's like his only metric
Right.
was, am I being faithful to the Lord?
Yeah.
And in this one, the context in this one for me too, we were talking about this whole, we live and operate our faith in a Western context, not like cowboy context, like I said, I do it cowboy church, but I mean not like, I mean like Western hemisphere.
Right.
And
We gotta get you a hat.
I've got a hat up there, but it's not a cowboy hat. My wife won't let me wear it in public.
Thank God.
And the churches that we're in are Western churches.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was telling somebody the other day, I get to speak at Cross Brand. There's Sunday morning, 900 people in the room.
Mhm.
And I love that.
Right.
That's really, for me, that's just fun. I
Right.
love doing it. But it was really awesome to sit down with 15 people in Falba
Yeah.
and watch them have maybe sometimes even more of a response
Yeah. Yeah.
than a larger group, just because of the intimacy of it or whatever. And it's so easy in the church, in the culture that we're in the West, in America, even in East Texas, where even the small churches get trapped into this. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of possessions can be a pride over a church building. It can be pride over a position or a
Oh,
title.
yeah. Yeah.
It can be wanting to have, man, I wish my church was as big as your church. How many did
Right.
y'all have? And we like to think that that doesn't happen. When I first started pastoring in Stanford, I went to the ministers' council, or what do they call them when all the preachers in town get together, once a
Yeah.
month or something.
Yeah.
And we'd have lunch and sit around.
And it's like the first thing they say.
Oh, man, I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
First church, right on it. Church was 20 people.
Yeah.
I was 20. The next youngest was in their 60s. And, just barely survive it,
Right. Right.
And it literally was that.
That's
you
good
know,
training environment
and
right there.
Hi, I'm Bob. I have 85 members.
People. Well, we sat down to eat, and literally the first 20 minutes was them complaining about their deacons, and how this and that, and it was just a total negative whatever.
Mhm.
And it was ministerial alliance is what they called it.
Right.
And I never went back, but I had
Right.
befriended this independent Baptist pastor that was in town.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how we met. We just did, but he didn't go.
Right.
And I was having lunch with him. I was like, "Why don't you go to these things?" And he was like, "Have you been to any?" And I said, "Well, I've only," I said, "I've been to one, and that was all I could handle." And he said, "There you go."
Yeah.
And he said, because it's everybody's worried about this.
Basically a gossip fest when you get in there and gripe and complain.
It can be.
It can be. And
Yeah.
now I will
I'm
also,
not, not all of them, but I'm
Right.
saying
Right.
that's a good example of what
now I've
physical
also been
pleasure
in some-
cravings for everything. And
I've also been involved in some, and I watched Love Thy Neighbor in Athens and Henderson County,
Yep.
where these cats get together, and it's just about the kingdom, man.
Yeah.
They're just
Yeah.
like and the difference was, instead of being in competition,
Right.
they're in collaboration,
Right.
yes, that's a good way
and
to
they're
say
in
it.
unity
Yeah.
versus, oh yeah, be careful of so and so. They left our church, now they're coming to you. That
Yep.
kind of stuff.
Yep.
But it's easy to get into. Well, I'm gonna stay here for a little while, then I'm gonna go to a bigger church. I'm gonna stay here,
Right.
and that was what you were talking about. It's really easy to get caught in that.
Yeah.
That cycle of professionalism,
Mm-hmm.
and there again, I don't have any problem with,
Right.
especially a church that's big enough. I mean, you got to have somebody that's available. And all,
Absolutely.
there's lots of stuff going on. You may need 15 or 20 staff members
Yeah.
in some places. I
Yeah.
get it. It's a big organization, At the same time, it's just easy to get caught up in trying to define what the response is supposed to be.
Right.
Because you never know. And he's
Right.
saying, hey, remember, you know the Father, the
Mhm.
word is strong in you,
Yeah.
and you've
Yes.
overcome the evil one
Yeah.
already.
Yep.
Just be careful as you move forward.
Right.
You've got everything you
Right.
need. Just don't let this junk trip you up. And that goes for, and I put that in the context of church world, but because you in your marriage,
Yeah.
Yeah, so everything
In
that
your
he
work life?
just said in there, you know, the craving for physical pleasure, craving for everything we see, and pride of our achievements and possessions. We're not just talking about church world here.
Yeah.
We're using that as an object lesson, but take those and you put them in your daily walk of where you are, because you may be a nobody from nowhere where you work, and your
Mhm.
community may just show up to church. You don't really have any involvement in terms of, you know, Sunday school teachers or any of that kind of stuff. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
Right.
Where are you taking your metrics that you want and that you have and that you'll invest in for an identity purpose?
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Because if you're doing that, and that may not necessarily be bad, but if that's how you have to do it to see that you're making ground in one form or another, that's the darkness he was talking about that you can go off into.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
may look good and be received well by everybody, and oh, you're doing it right, and I wish I could do it that way. And 5 years from now, you find out how big of a hole it really was.
Right.
And so, well, how do I know that now? I don't know how to tell you that, but I know that if you love God and your heart's perfect toward Him, that may be a training ground He's going to drag you through, and then one day He's going to just turn the light on, and you're going to get into that, oh man, I messed that up. You can live in that, or you can stand up and keep going,
Well,
right?
I mean, talking about corporate, when you work in the corporate world, I work in the corporate world, and I have family members that work in like these huge corporations,
Right.
and everything, it's not even just a stereotype, it's just the way it is about getting to the next level, getting to this manager, getting to a partner, getting to this,
Right.
and
Right.
stepping on who. It really is the world out there. People
Yeah.
take their identity.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But when I was working at Vantone early on, I remember you and I having conversations because Tim was my supervisor there about, you know, it's like instead of saying I am a flavor chemist who preaches on the side, it's
Right.
no, I'm a pastor who does this to pay the bills.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
And it's about where we put our, and when we get our identity in the right spot,
Yep.
you know, then the question's like, okay, work wants you to take a position as a, you know, that I just got a different role, supervisory role at work. One of the things that I had to work through with my wife and prayer on was, can I be effective in that role? Is it going to impact the ministry?
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Will it decrease some things I need to do with my family?
Mhm.
You know, advancement is in that pride of your possessions,
Right.
and not that advancement is bad,
Right.
but it can be. Stagnation can be bad.
Yep.
And I think that's the thing that you talking about. Paul writes it, Peter writes it, John's writing it. Everybody wants to know what's the path, what's the formula, where do I go? And they're constantly going, hey, listen, you know the Father,
Right.
the word is strong in you,
Right.
and you've already overcome the evil one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be careful for side trips.
Yeah.
And those side trips look like a lot of different things, and sometimes they look like good things.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean,
And don't let that paralyze you either. I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna go through all these things.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
probably
you're
going
gonna
through
go
them right
through
now.
them.
Yeah.
But God uses those things. I'm saying that because we're getting close to time, and I need to. We're building all this up, and I think this is what John's doing. And he says in verse 18, I'm gonna read this out of the New Living Translation. Dear children, the last hour is here. You have heard that the Antichrist is coming. That's capital A in study Bibles, like Satan's kind of or stuff. And it says, and already many such antichrists have appeared. From this we know that the last hour has come. These people left our churches, but they never really belonged to us. He's making a distinction here. Keep going. Otherwise, they would have stayed with us. When they left, it proved that they did not belong to us. But you are not that, for the Holy One has given you his Spirit. And the Holy One is capitalized.
Mm-hmm.
And all of you know the truth. We just talked about all that. So I am writing to you not because you don't know the truth, but because you know the difference between truth and lies. We could park there. Hold on. And who is a liar? Anyone who here's where I was getting. Anyone who says that Jesus is not the Christ. So I guess what I see in that, and what I think John is trying to teach, is that we all have differences. There's been I'll use the term church split. I don't really know because I don't know any other way to say it. And I don't really mean it in a bad way. So we just kind of went through one where I go to church at, right? And I'm not in the middle of it or anything. I'm just watching.
Right.
But I've seen that transition happen so many times.
Right.
And we do get parked. It is a unity issue in a lot of times, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, if those brothers and sisters that are going off because they're ticked off about X, Y, Z, but if you were to say, are you denying that Jesus is the Christ and the one that did everything that happened in verse 2 of chapter 1 up here, right? The propitiation thing, that there is a different way? And they bow up and they go, no, Jesus is the Son of God and he was sacrificed for my sins. Now you've set the basis. All the rest of it is just, I almost said conjecture, but that was not the right word. They believe in those things. That is the corner, the bedrock, all of it. All the rest of that stuff's going to get worked out.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now that can really rock your theology to some extent or another. But again, if you find yourself in these things where you're going, what's this? What's that? How am I? All that stuff. I would tell you that God's in the middle of that thing with a big spoon in the middle of it, and he's stirring it up.
And
Well, no, that's confusion. Well, not necessarily.
Yeah. And it's funny that you, as all of this comes together, and you were at Falba the other day, and in the full gospel world, I don't want to say they're more spiritual, but you start to listen more and kind of watch for the Spirit to move, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in watching for the Spirit to move, sometimes you can kind of begin to grab on to lots of little things and try to make them something that maybe they're not, right?
Oh, well, even the Baptists do that.
Yeah, but in this conversation, one of my spiritual uncles, Jimmy Clopton, down in Madisonville, man, Jimmy told me one day we were praying, and then he said, and you got to be able to test the spirits, boy. And I was like, test the spirits? What are you talking about, Jimmy? And he quoted that line, right? He said, if you have a feeling that you're supposed to do something and you think it's Holy Spirit guiding you that way, talk to that thing about Jesus Christ being the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus Christ being the Lord.
I would agree with it.
Yeah.
And whenever you talk to that feeling, hey, this is Jesus Christ, the Lord, leading me this direction. If it's not, it's got to go.
Yeah.
And it does, right? So it's kind of fun tying all of that into
Which actually takes it all the way back to the reason he's even writing the letter.
right.
You guys,
Yes.
you guys,
Yeah, exactly.
you guys have everything you need.
Exactly.
And I can so resonate with the person that feels like I don't have any influence. I don't have any training. I'm just a bumpkin. I'm just fill in the blank with a million different things.
Come on.
Pride of life.
Pride of
Right.
That's exactly,
what that
Right.
is.
It's the pride of life. I have seen people who were uneducated, inarticulate,
Come on.
impact the kingdom in ways that
Yeah.
I can't.
Me too.
That-
I've seen professors do things that I can't do that.
Right.
And then I've seen God do things with me that I wouldn't even trying to do.
Right.
Yeah.
But the impact is up. It's up to him. It's the whole
Yep.
sowing the seed thing. You talk about it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the contrasts for me, and what I was trying to show, is to go into Falba, 15 people.
Yeah.
And he's working just as hard in a group of 15
Yeah.
as he is in a group of 1,000.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And the impact on the kingdom, who can know it
Yeah.
except him?
I was way struggling whenever the Lord called me away from Sand Springs, and man, I knew it, and I was like, it's driving me crazy, and I'm riding on a back road one Saturday morning, and Pastor Doug Harris from down in Deer Park gives me a call. And he's like, "Man, I got a word for you." I'm like, "Okay." And he talked about how Philip was basically in the middle of a revival, and God said, "I need you to leave the revival because this guy in this chariot means as much to me as all of those people do."
Yes, that's such a good
Right?
story. Yeah.
And whenever Doug got done with that, I was like, I received that word. All right. And because it just resonated in my heart. And that's
Right.
what you're talking about,
Yeah.
whether we get to do this in front of thousands or it's 10 or 2.
One.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. It's all bringing him glory, and he'll do all the stuff that he needs to do with it.
Well, and even about our ministry, I've had people say to me, why are y'all still doing the podcast? You only have a couple of followers. You only have this, you only have that. You know, you're not viral. There's no monetization. There's no this. And there's times where I've been like, I don't know.
Yeah, come on.
I almost shut it down a few years ago.
Mhm.
And one of the guys that works at our company, he's a super kingdom guy, but he's really gifted at building leadership in the business. He's just gifted. His name's Matthias. And I accidentally got onto I signed up for a webinar he was doing, like a coaching thing, you know. He was just giving it away and leadership stuff. I think me and one other guy, the only guys that showed up.
Right.
And he was just like, let's just talk about it. And I was like, man, I'm fixing to shut the ministry down. I already started the process to tear down the website.
Yeah.
And he's like, why are you doing that? And I was like, man, nobody's following.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I was like, and honestly, I was trying to spiritualize. And I was like, I just feel like I'm trying to push a square peg in a round hole. And he was like, but didn't the Lord tell you to do it? And I said, well, I think so, but I guess I'm thinking I might be wrong.
Right.
And he was like, no, that's not what I asked you. Did the Lord tell you to do it? He's like, you need to answer that question. So we talked, and I was like, I believe he did.
Yeah.
And he said, okay. He goes, I'm going to make some observations, and you do with it what you want. He said, you're trying to do all this stuff, trying to find out what fits.
Right.
He goes, figure out what it is God wants you to do. One thing, go do that.
Yeah.
And focus. And it was like a light bulb went on. And that was when we really started doing the Bible study training.
Right.
And some other things. Fast forward, I still hear that from people from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, small potatoes, who are you guys, blah, blah,
Right.
blah.
Right.
And I just smile because I literally can't tell you how many times someone said, I saw a podcast.
Yeah.
Man, it really helped me.
Yeah.
Or I went to one of your trainings and it's people from Mexico, people at Falmouth.
Yeah.
Never seen this before. It reminds me, I'll close with this by Gene Wars, an old navigator, and he said, you've not lived until you've exploded the word of God into the heart of another human being.
Amen.
And
one.
And
Come on. Come on.
Because when you realize what's really up, you realize you change their eternal trajectory.
Yeah.
And blessed is he who is wins souls.
Amen.
And and it's not just one. It's one that does one, that one that does one, that one that has one. And so I like this letter because he's saying you've got everything you need.
Amen.
And I want to tell everybody that's hearing this. You may think you've got to get all of it right, all the answers figured out. John's telling you, you know the Father.
Yeah.
The Word is strong in you, and you've overcome the evil one.
Amen.
March forward.
Amen.
Just march
Amen.
forward.
Yeah.
We got 30 seconds. You got anything?
I
Think about
think
it?
that's how we should end it.
All right. We'll see y'all later. We love you. We appreciate you. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.